The Miami sky was painted in streaks of molten orange and fading indigo, the horizon a glowing seam where the last of the sun kissed the Atlantic. The luxury hotel on Ocean Drive stood like a jewel against the coastline, its glass facade catching the fire of twilight. Inside, chandeliers glowed, champagne glasses clinked, and the hum of money and influence filled the air. Adrian Vale, 32 years old and already a name synonymous with scandal and success, stood at the center of it all. He adjusted the cuffs of his navy silk suit, staring at his reflection in the mirror of his penthouse suite. Light eyes, pale and piercing, a jawline honed like it had been sculpted for magazine covers, and the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. This was his arena. He thrived on being watched, dissected, adored, and hated. A knock at the door snapped him from his thoughts. Ray Lynn, his assistant of 3 months, leaned in with her tablet clutched like a shield.
"Your guests are arriving," she reported, her voice tinged with awe and unease. Adrian barely glanced at her. "The champagne is flowing? The photographers know my good side?" Ray nodded quickly. She knew by now that confidence dripped off him like cologne, heavy and intoxicating. What unsettled her was that tonight he seemed even more dangerous, riding high on the controversy he had created. It had been only a week since his voice had sliced through the airwaves of a popular podcast, each word calculated but reckless. When asked what inspired his perfumes, Adrian leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with arrogance, and delivered the line that would ignite social media like wildfire. "Black women always smell too strongly, too heavy, never delicate, never sexy, not like European girls." The backlash had been swift. Partnerships crumbled, hashtags trended, think pieces dissected his prejudice. For others, it might have spelled ruin. For Adrian, it was fuel. Controversy sold, and he had built his empire on gasoline and sparks. White Echo, his new fragrance, would launch tonight, and he was convinced it would become his biggest triumph yet. The elevator doors opened into the ballroom, a sea of pristine white roses, white drapes, white velvet couches. Servers carried trays of champagne bubbling like liquid light. Under a cascade of crystal, at the center stood a pedestal displaying the sleek alabaster bottle of White Echo. The crowd stirred as Adrian entered. Cameras flashed, voices rose, and every gaze turned toward him, as if gravity had shifted. He moved with the confidence of a man who had never doubted his place in the spotlight. A reporter shouted, "Is there any response to last week's remarks, Mr. Vale?" Adrian flashed his $1,000,000 smile. "I just tell the truth. Some people cannot handle it." Laughter rippled. Others gasped. A few clapped. He thrived in that tension, balancing between admiration and outrage. He mingled, he posed, he shook hands, each move rehearsed, each smile calculated. Then it happened. A current in the air, invisible yet undeniable, brushed past him. It was not the cloying perfume of the models, nor the synthetic sweetness of White Echo that clung to every corner of the room. This was something else. Warm, deep, complex. Vanilla, but darker, like the memory of childhood sweets. Sandalwood and amber weave shadows through it. Jasmine, faint but persistent, like a whisper. He faltered mid-sentence, his carefully rehearsed charm unraveling for the first time in years. His gaze snapped toward the entrance. She stood there, a vision wrapped in burnt orange silk, the fabric hugging her curves as though sculpted for her alone. Her skin was a rich brown that glowed beneath the chandeliers, her lips soft and complete with a color that echoed the flame of her dress. But it was her eyes that held him still. Brown, steady, unhurried, as if she carried her own gravity into the room. "Who is she?" he murmured, almost to himself. No one recognized her. She was not part of the glittering elite who usually orbited Adrian Vale. She moved through the crowd with quiet confidence, pausing to touch the petals of a white rose arrangement, to glance at the posters of his fragrance campaign. Every step she took seemed to trail that intoxicating scent, and, to his own astonishment, Adrian found himself following. He intercepted her near a cluster of guests. "Enjoying the party?" he asked, his voice smooth, his smile practiced.
She looked at him and he caught something unfamiliar in her gaze. Recognition, but not the adoration he expected. Something sharper, something like judgment. "It is very white," she said softly, her voice carrying a melody he could not place. Adrian chuckled, gesturing to the decor. "That is the theme, white echo, pure, clean, simple." Her lips curved, but it was not quite a smile. "Is that what white means to you? Purity?" The question cut deeper than he liked. He ignored it. "I did not catch your name." "Maya Arden." He savored the syllables. "Maya Arden. And how did you slip into my exclusive launch?" "I won a giveaway," she said, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Lucky me. Lucky indeed." He leaned closer, inhaling the fragrance around her like an aura. "That scent you are wearing is not one of mine." "No," she said calmly. "I made it myself." For once, Adrian was caught off guard. "You made it? Are you in the industry?" "I am an aromatherapist. I blend scents at Essence of Peace in Little Haiti." Her tone was neither boastful nor humble, simply a fact. And for the first time in years, Adrian felt his script slipping away. "Whatever it is remarkable," he admitted. She asked, "Something different from what you are used to from women like me?" And though her voice was soft, the edge in it made the champagne in his stomach curdle. He blinked. "What do you mean?" "I heard your podcast," she said simply. "You meant me, right? Women like me are the ones who smell too strongly." Heat crept up his neck, something foreign and unwelcome, embarrassment. He opened his mouth, but she continued before he could recover. "I did not come to scold you, Mr. Vale. I came to see what all the fuss was about. And now I know." She gestured faintly at the sterile white decor. "Exactly what I expected." She turned to leave, but Adrian, a man never chased, found his hand touching her arm. "Wait." Her eyes dropped to his hand until he withdrew it, uncharacteristically flustered. "You have already said enough," she murmured. "There are plenty of women here who smell just right for you." She walked away, her orange dress aflame cutting through the sea of white. Adrian stood rooted, shaken in a way he had never been. For the rest of the evening, through the speeches, the photo ops, the endless toasts, his eyes searched for Maya Arden. Each time she passed near, her scent wrapped around him, pulling at something buried deep beneath the layers of arrogance and control. When the night waned and she moved toward the exit, Adrian abandoned his admirers and hurried after her. He caught her at the elevator. He said, "Let me drive you home," his voice stripped of its usual polish. She studied him, her brown eyes unreadable. "I have a ride. Please." He surprised himself with the urgency. "I want to talk. About what I said. About your perfume. About anything you want." She held the elevator door, regarding him for a long moment. Then, she nodded with a sigh that seemed both weary and curious. "One conversation. That is all." Relief surged through him as he stepped inside beside her. They descended silently, the small space thick with the fragrance that had undone him. Outside, his black car waited. As they slipped into the back seat, neither noticed the paparazzi lens glinting across the street. The city lights blurred as the car pulled away, and for the first time in a very long time, Adrian Vale felt something he could not package, sell, or control. He felt undone. And somewhere beneath the carefully constructed empire of White Echo, the foundation of his world began to crack. The car wound through the glowing Miami streets, neon signs reflecting on the windows like shards of light against the darkness. Adrian Vale sat stiff in the back seat, hands clasped, his usual poise frayed by a nervous energy he had never known. Beside him, Maya Arden gazed out the window, her profile serene yet impenetrable, the faint scent of her perfume filling the small space between them. "Where to, Mr. Vale?" the driver asked, breaking the silence. "Coconut Grove," Maya answered before Adrian could. Her voice was calm, decisive, as though she were in control of the evening now. Adrian leaned back, letting the name roll through his mind. Coconut Grove. It was not his world of penthouses and penthouse parties. It was something different, something he could not frame within his empire. The ride was quiet. Each time Adrian tried to speak, he stopped himself, aware of how ridiculous his polished charm would sound at that moment. Instead, he watched her, trying to decipher the lines of her face, the stillness in her gaze. She was not impressed by him, not dazzled by his reputation, and that disarmed him more than any critic ever had. When the car pulled up in front of a small studio, tucked between a cafe and a bookstore, Maya stepped out without waiting for him. Adrian followed, feeling strangely out of place on the quiet street where the scent of fresh bread mingled with night-blooming jasmine. She unlocked the glass door and ushered him inside. The space was nothing like the grand ballroom he had left behind. Plants lined the walls, their leaves casting gentle shadows in the lamplight. Wooden shelves held small bottles labeled in careful handwriting. A massage table sat in the corner, draped in soft linen, and a faint hum of calming music floated from unseen speakers. The air was rich with layered scents, clean yet complex, grounding yet stirring. Adrian said, "This is where you work," though it came out more as a wonder than a question. "This is where I heal," Maya corrected, flicking on another lamp that illuminated a counter cluttered with droppers, vials, and paper strips. She moved behind it with the ease of someone at home. "And this," she added, gesturing to the bottles, "is where I create." Adrian approached, curiosity overtaking his arrogance. "You blend all of these yourself?" "Every drop," she said. "Each person who comes here is different, so each blend is different. Scent connects to memory, to emotion. It can calm, awaken, or remind you of love or loss." She selected a small bottle and held it out. "Here." He took it, unscrewed the cap, and inhaled. The aroma was sharp, almost medicinal. "What is this?" "Tea tree oil, strong on its own, almost too strong." She handed him another bottle. "And this one was soft, floral, familiar, lavender." She nodded, then returned both bottles, placing each drop onto a paper strip. She swirled it gently, then held it toward him. "Now smell them together." He leaned in, expecting the clash of two extremes. Instead, he found something new, balanced. Fresh but not harsh, soft but not weak. Together, they were whole. "Nice," he murmured. Maya said that nothing is too strong when understood and appreciated, her eyes meeting his with quiet intensity. He knew she was not just talking about oils. He wanted to answer, to say something real, but the words jammed in his throat. He was not used to vulnerability, not used to being the student. For the first time in years, he was simply silent. Maya returned to her workstation, her movements steady, deliberate. She lifted another bottle, inhaled, and set it aside. Then she spoke without looking at him. "Why do you believe what you said on that podcast about black women?" Adrian froze. He had known it was coming, but the directness still hit like a blow. "I do not know," he said finally. "It just came out." "Things do not just come out," Maya replied. "They come from somewhere inside." He rubbed his hand through his hair, frustrated. "My mother is white. I grew up in her world. I never knew my father. She wanted me to fit in, to be accepted. And in her world, softness was white. Anything else was too much. Too loud, too strong." Maya set down the bottle she was holding and turned to him. "And you believed her world was the only one worth fitting into." His chest tightened, the words lodging in his throat. "I never questioned it," he admitted softly, "until tonight." Silence filled the room for a moment, broken only by the faint music notes and the mingling scents of oils. Then Maya reached for a small vial, uncapped it, and handed it to him. "Smell this." He obeyed. Vanilla. Sweet, warm, soothing. "It reminds me of my mother," Maya said quietly. "She passed away 5 years ago. Vanilla and jasmine were her scent. The sandalwood and amber are mine. They keep her with me together, but they are also my own." Adrian swallowed hard, the raw honesty cutting through him. "I am sorry," he said, and for once, he meant it. She looked at him, a flicker of surprise in her eyes at his sincerity. Then she nodded and began tidying her bottles. He wanted to tell her about his mother. The perfume bottles cluttered her dresser, and the single parent trying to shape him into survival by sanding down his edges. But the words caught in his throat. Instead, he stood there, inhaling the air she had created, which seemed cleaner than any he had ever known. His phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, saw his publicist's name flashing, and hesitated. He should answer. He always answered. But tonight,
He slid the phone back into his jacket without replying. "Can I see you again?" he asked suddenly, the words spilling before he could stop them. Maya looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why?" He started fumbling for the truth. "Because I thought I was wrong, and I want to understand." She studied him for a long moment, her gaze steady and searching. "I work here Tuesday through Saturday," she said at last. "If you are serious, you can come back tomorrow. But not for cameras, not for headlines. Just to learn." "I will," he said quickly, the certainty surprising even him. "Tomorrow." She turned back to her bottles, her hands steady once more. He lingered, unwilling to leave the scent of her studio, the smell of something real. When he finally stepped outside, the night air felt flat, empty, missing the depth he had just breathed. His phone buzzed again, notifications flooding in, reminders of the world he had built. But for the first time in years, Adrian Vale did not care. The only thing he could still smell was vanilla, jasmine, sandalwood, and amber. The scent of Maya Arden. And it was enough to make him want to come back. The morning after the launch, sunlight spilled across the glass walls of Adrian Vale's penthouse, but he hardly noticed. His phone had not stopped buzzing since dawn. News outlets, blogs, and social media notifications piled up, each headline a dagger and a lure. Perfume king seen leaving with mystery woman. Who is the stranger who stole Adrian Vale's attention? Scandal deepens after controversial comments. Adrian scrolled through them with a clenched jaw. Every outlet had the same grainy photos of him and Maya stepping into his car. Her orange silk dress burned like fire against the sterile white backdrop of his event, her presence a symbol none of the commentators could resist. Ray Lynn entered the suite, holding a tablet like a shield. "Your publicist is demanding you call her back. She has already tried 20 times. Adrian tossed his phone onto the couch. "Let her wait." Ray hesitated, clearly torn. "The internet is calling her your damage control. They say you staged the whole thing." Adrian turned, his eyes sharp. "Does she look like a prop to you?" Ray swallowed and shook her head. "No, but that is not the point. This could get ugly for you." Adrian's lips curved into a grim smile. "It is already ugly. That is why it is real." Meanwhile, across town in Coconut Grove, Maya sat at the small kitchen table of her modest apartment, her tea cooling untouched in front of her. Her phone was lit with messages, some from friends, some from clients, many from strangers. Sellout, betrayer, opportunist. The words stung, not because they were true, but because they came from her community. Her older sister Kayla's voice still rang in her ears from their call earlier that morning. "You cannot let him use you. This man insulted us, and now you are riding in his car like you forgot." Maya had tried to explain, but Kayla would not listen. And a part of Maya could not blame her. What had she been thinking, letting Adrian into her world, into her studio? She stared at the bottles on her counter, her mother's old recipes written in neat script tucked into a drawer nearby. That was supposed to be her legacy, untainted, uncommercialized. The bell above the studio door chimed at noon. Maya looked up, expecting a client, but it was Adrian. He was dressed down, with jeans and a linen shirt, and there was no trace of his usual armor. "You came," she said, more surprised than she intended. "I said I would." He glanced at the empty studio. "No appointments today?" "I canceled them," she admitted. "I needed space." "From me," Adrian guessed. "From all of this," she corrected. She turned her back to him, tidying bottles that did not need tidying. "Do you realize what people are saying? They think I am helping you clean up your mess." Adrian's expression hardened. "I did not ask you to, but you knew this would happen," she pressed. "You live for scandal, for headlines." "Not this time," he said firmly. "I am here because of you, not because of them." Maya turned then, meeting his gaze. "And why should I believe that? I have not been thinking about my brand for the first time in years. I am thinking about balance." He picked up 2 bottles from her counter, lavender and tea tree, the same ones she had shown him the night before. "You taught me that." Maya's resolve faltered, but her phone buzzed with a message before she could reply. Her hands trembled as she read it. A boycott page had been created online,
calling for clients to cancel appointments at Essence of Peace. Her business, her mother's legacy, was suddenly under siege. She shoved the phone toward Adrian. "Look what you have done." His face darkened as he read. "I will fix this." "How?" Maya demanded. "You cannot silence the internet." "Watch me," Adrian said, though his voice carried more desperation than certainty. By evening, the damage was spreading. Beauty bloggers dissected the photos, and influencers debated whether Maya was a pawn or a partner. The hashtag #BoycottVeil trended alongside Boycott Essence. Adrian sat in his office, ignoring the furious calls from Tessa Bloom, his publicist. He drafted a post himself, something he had never done without a team. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, uncharacteristically hesitant. Then he typed, "I have spent my career creating fragrances that mask who we really are." Yesterday, at Essence of Peace, Maya Arden reminded me that true beauty comes from honoring authenticity. Her custom blends are transformative. If you are in Miami, visit her studio, not because of me, but because she deserves your support. He posted it without reading it twice. The reaction was immediate. By morning, a line stretched outside Maya's studio. Clients new and old, celebrities, and curious strangers crowded the sidewalk. Maya stared in disbelief as she unlocked the door. For every critic calling her a sellout, 10 more wanted to experience what Adrian had praised. Inside, Adrian stood waiting, leaning against the counter as if he belonged there. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Did I make it worse?" he asked. "I do not know," she admitted, glancing at the crowd. "There is a line around the block." "I meant what I said," Adrian told her. "You changed me yesterday. I wanted to give something back." Maya's chest tightened. She wanted to tell him to leave, to stop interfering, but the truth was undeniable. Her mother's legacy had never been more alive. "One dinner," she said, finally. "That is all." Adrian's smile was genuine, unguarded. "Real," he said. "No champagne towers, no photographers." Maya repeated softly, as though tasting the word for the first time. That night, as they sat in a small Cuban restaurant in Little Havana, the world outside roared with controversy. But inside, amid plates of rice and beans, laughter, and stories of childhood scarred and mended, something fragile and true began to take root. Neither of them knew how long it would last. Neither of them knew what storms still waited. But for the first time, Adrian Veil was not the perfume king. He was just a man trying to breathe in the scent of honesty. The following week unraveled with the velocity of a storm. What had begun as whispers across social media became an avalanche of scrutiny. Maya Arden's studio, Essence of Peace, was still filled with eager new clients, many of whom were drawn by Adrian Veil's post. Yet with every smile at her door came another shadow on her phone. Boycott campaigns raged louder. Critics claimed she was selling out her heritage to a man who had insulted women like her only days before. Maya worked longer hours than ever, her hands steady as she blended oils. But her heart carried a weight she could not distill away. At night, she replayed her mother's words long ago, about scents carrying memory and truth. Was she dishonoring that truth now, letting Adrian near her world? Adrian, meanwhile, stood at a crossroads. His brand's board demanded answers. Sales of White Echo had flatlined, investors rattled by his refusal to release a statement. He ignored their calls, his thoughts consumed by the quiet sanctuary of Maya's studio. For the first time, he wanted more than applause. He wanted authenticity. He wanted her. But authenticity came with cost. The cost arrived on a Tuesday evening, in the form of a sleek email chain Ray Lynn had been tricked into opening. A former lover turned rival, Sloane Hart, had learned of Adrian's late-night visits to Maya's studio. She had connections inside his labs, and she wanted blood. One photograph of a perfume prototype, labeled, "After Maya," was all she needed. Within hours, beauty blogs splashed it across headlines. Is Adrian Veil exploiting his new lover for profit? Maya saw it first. The article flashed on her screen as she closed the studio for the night. Her chest tightened as she read each line. A new perfume named after her was created in secret. Leaked photos of sleek bottles. Anonymous sources claiming Adrian was spinning romance into marketing. Her stomach twisted.
The bell above her door chimed. Adrian entered, his tie loosened, his hair disheveled, the weight of the day pressing on his shoulders. "I was coming to tell you, you were going to sell my name, my scent." Maya cut him off, her voice trembling. "No," Adrian said quickly. "I wanted it to be a gift. I never planned to release it without your blessing." "A gift," she repeated, disbelief etched across her face. "My story, my mother's memory, turned into your product. Do you not see how that feels?" Adrian's throat tightened. He stepped closer, hands open, unarmed. "Maya, I swear, it was never for them. It was for you." But Maya's eyes burned. "You turned something sacred into your tool again." The silence stretched, broken only by the muffled music drifting from a cafe next door. Adrian wanted to reach for her, but the distance between them was wider than any ballroom. Maya shook her head, her voice low. "I need space. Do not come here again." Adrian stood frozen as she turned away, her orange dress catching the lamplight one last time, before disappearing into the back room. The door between them felt heavier than steel. That night, Adrian returned to his penthouse, the city sprawling below like a glittering sea he no longer cared to rule. He stared at the prototype bottle of After Maya on his desk. The scent was perfect, warmth, sweetness, memory, but trying to capture her essence, he had destroyed the fragile trust she had offered him. His phone buzzed with messages from his team celebrating the viral leak. "This could save us," they wrote. "Pre-orders are already climbing." Adrian hurled the phone across the room, the screen shattering against marble. His empire was celebrating, but he had never felt more like a failure. Across town, Maya sat at her sister's kitchen table. Kayla slid a bowl of ice cream before her, worry shadowing her face. "He was using me," Maya whispered, tears finally spilling, "just like you said." Kayla squeezed her hand. "Maybe, maybe not. But either way, you will survive this. You always do." Maya looked at the bottles in her bag, her mother's formulas. She had built Essence of Peace with her bare hands. She had thought she could let someone in, and now, once again, she was left holding the fragments. For Adrian Vale and Maya Arden, the first crack had opened. It was yet to be seen whether it would collapse everything they had begun to build, or reveal the truth beneath. 3 days passed, and Maya Arden did not answer one of Adrian Vale's calls. She ignored his texts, his flowers delivered each morning to the studio, the carefully worded notes begging her to listen. She hid her phone in her bag during the day, leaving Ray to manage the chaos of appointments that had exploded since the viral post. Clients still arrived in droves, curious to be part of the story, but Maya's heart was no longer in it. Each blend she made felt like a shadow of itself, as though the purity of her work had been tainted. At Kayla's apartment, where she had taken refuge, Maya nursed cups of tea that went cold in her hands. Kayla did her best to be supportive, though her voice carried an edge of vindication. "You cannot keep running from this. He was never going to change. Not for you, not for anyone." Maya shook her head, though she had no words. She missed him, that was the truth. She missed his flawed honesty, the way he had looked at her in the studio's quiet. But every time she remembered the sleek photos of After Maya splashed across the blogs, her stomach twisted with betrayal. He had taken something sacred and made it into a spectacle. Adrian, meanwhile, found himself in the coldest exile of his life. His penthouse felt cavernous, echoing with the hum of electronics and the silence of unanswered phones. He sat at the long glass table of his boardroom, surrounded by furious faces. "You cannot walk away from this launch, Adrian," his marketing director snapped, slamming a folder in front of him. "The buzz is incredible. Sephora called, Nordstrom called. Everyone wants this fragrance." "It was never meant for them," Adrian said quietly, his eyes on the table. Tessa Bloom, his publicist, leaned forward, her voice sharp. "It does not matter what it was meant for. This is your lifeline. White Echo is collapsing. Investors are ready to cut you loose. This fragrance can save you." Adrian looked up, his pale eyes tired but resolute. "I am not releasing it." The board erupted, voices layered over one another, demanding, pleading, threatening. But Adrian stood, straightening his jacket as though shedding a weight. "It was personal. It is over.
This meeting is over. He walked out before anyone could stop him. He loosened his tie in the elevator and pressed his forehead against the cool glass. For the first time in his career, he had let go of profit and survival for something that could not be sold. But the hollow feeling in his chest told him the cost was only beginning. Back at Essence of Peace, the boycott grew louder. Anonymous reviews flooded online pages, calling Maya a sellout, a pawn. She scrolled through them late at night, her throat tight. These were her clients, her neighbors, her community. People she had healed and welcomed with blends crafted from memory and love. They turned against her because she had let Adrian Vale step into her life. One evening, she sat at her work table long after the shop closed. The bottles gleamed under the lamp, their labels familiar, their scents comforting. She picked up one of her mother's old recipes, traced the fading ink with her finger, and whispered into the silence, "Am I betraying you too?" The bell above the door startled her. She looked up to find Adrian standing there, rain dripping from his hair, his expression raw. Maya said, "I told you not to come," rising to her feet. "I know," he said, his voice hoarse, "but I had to tell you. I killed the fragrance after Maya died." Her breath caught. "What?" "I told the board, the investors, everyone, it will never see the light of day." Maya searched his face, expecting calculation, spin, another performance. But all she saw was exhaustion and something more profound. He had cut the thread that held his empire together for her. "Why would you do that?" she whispered. "Because it was wrong," Adrian admitted. "And because I would rather lose everything than lose the chance of you believing in me again." For a long moment, silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain against the windows. Maya wanted to reach out, to believe, but her heart was not ready. She shook her head slowly. "It is too late, Adrian." He nodded, his jaw tight, as though he had expected nothing else. Then he turned and walked out into the rain, leaving her staring at the empty doorway, her hands trembling over the bottles that had once felt like her whole world. Maya returned to Kayla's apartment that night, curling into her sister's couch, trying to convince herself she had made the right decision. Across town, Adrian poured himself a glass of whiskey and stared at the broken prototype bottle he had smashed against the floor. For both of them, silence was safer than words, but in that silence they each carried the same ache, the same loss, the same question. Was it over, or was this only the beginning of something neither of them understood? The storm that had been brewing finally broke in the full glare of the public eye. News anchors dissected the scandal nightly. Pundits debated whether Adrian Vale was a misunderstood visionary or simply another arrogant man exposed by his own hubris. Social media roared with every possible opinion, and the name Maya Arden trended alongside his in hashtags that twisted between admiration and venom. Ray Lynn delivered the news one morning, her face pale as she hovered in the doorway of Adrian's office. "Diane Mercer wants you on her show. National television. Primetime. She said it is your chance to explain yourself." Adrian looked up from the half-empty glass of water on his desk, his eyes bloodshot from another sleepless night. "And what if I do not want to explain?" "You have no choice," Ray said quietly. "The investors are circling. The publicist is threatening to resign. If you do not speak now, you are finished." Adrian rubbed his temples, the weight of years pressing on him. He had built his entire empire on the edge of controversy, but this time it was different. This time there was Maya. He could not craft a spin without thinking of her face, her voice telling him that nothing was too strong when it was understood. That afternoon he drove to Essence of Peace. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, and Maya looked up from the counter where she was restocking oils. Her eyes narrowed, but she did not turn him away. "What do you want, Adrian?" "To tell the truth," he said simply, "on live television. But I cannot do it without you." Maya froze, the bottle in her hand trembling slightly. "You want me to stand beside you, after everything? After the leak, after the boycott, after my business nearly collapsed?" "Yes," Adrian admitted, "because none of this means anything if I do it alone." Her first instinct was to refuse, to protect herself, her mother's legacy, and her own fragile heart. But then she remembered the look in his eyes the night he had told her he had killed the fragrance. She had believed him then, and despite everything, a part of her still wanted to believe. "One conversation," she said finally, echoing her words from the night they had first left the launch together, "just one." The following evening, under the harsh lights of the studio, Maya stood backstage beside Adrian. He wore no tie, his suit simple, his expression taut with resolve. She wore a yellow dress her mother had once given her, bright against the somber backdrop. Diane Mercer welcomed them onto the stage, her voice smooth, her reputation for asking the questions no one else dared hanging in the air. "Adrian Vale," she began, "the world has watched you rise and fall spectacularly. You have made incendiary comments, you have lost partnerships, and now you stand accused of exploiting a woman to save your brand.
Why should anyone believe you have changed?" Adrian leaned forward, his hands clasped, his voice stripped of its usual polish. "Because I was wrong. I grew up denying half of who I am. My father was black. My mother raised me to fit into a world where that part of me had no place. I learned to survive by rejecting it, by dismissing people who looked like him, and it turned me into a man who thought cruelty could pass for honesty." Diane turned to Maya. "And you, Miss Arden, why are you here tonight? Why stand beside a man who insulted women like you in front of the world?" Maya drew a breath, her gaze steady on the audience. "Because change has to start somewhere. I am not here to excuse what he said. I am here because when I look at him now, I see a man who is beginning to question, starting to listen. That does not erase the harm, but it opens a door." The studio was silent, the weight of her words sinking into the air. And then from the audience, a voice rang out. Sloane Hart rose from her seat in a red dress that gleamed under the lights. Her smile was sharp as glass. "Do you really believe this act, Maya? I dated him for 2 years. I know who he really is, a manipulator. A man who would never dare commit to a black woman because it would confuse his brand." Those are his words. Gasps rippled across the studio. Diane's eyes lit with the promise of drama. "Adrian, is that true?" The air seemed to freeze. Adrian turned toward Maya, his expression raw. "I said it," he admitted, his voice steady, though his chest pounded. "I said it when I was still performing, when I was still running from myself. But it was a lie, every part of it." Sloane laughed, a sound sharp and bitter. "People do not change in 3 weeks, darling. This is nothing but your latest marketing stunt." Maya rose slowly from her seat, her eyes fixed on Sloane. "Change is not instant, but it is possible. And the difference between you and me is that I do not need to cling to his past to feel powerful." Sloane's face flushed as the audience murmured. Diane quickly closed the segment, promising viewers they had just witnessed one of the most candid interviews in the show's history. Backstage, Adrian exhaled as though he had been holding his breath for years. He turned to Maya. "Why did you defend me?" "Because," she said softly, "if you genuinely mean what you said tonight, then it is not me you are defending, it is yourself." Adrian Vale felt stripped of armor, exposed yet free for the first time. The stage had demanded reckoning, and he had delivered it with nothing left to hide. Whether the world believed him or not no longer mattered. What mattered was the woman standing beside him and the truth finally spoken aloud. The fire of public opinion raged outside, but for Adrian and Maya, a new flame had been lit, uncertain, fragile, but real. The interview sent shockwaves through every corner of Adrian Vale's life. By sunrise the next day, newspapers splashed headlines that painted him as either a man redeemed or a fraud exposed. Clips of Maya's calm defense and Adrian's confession were clipped, shared, and dissected in millions of homes and phones. The board of Vale Fragrances convened in emergency sessions. Investors demanded statements, and the world's noise reached a deafening pitch. Adrian sat in his penthouse staring out at the Atlantic, his reflection faint in the glass, his mind strangely still. He had spoken the truth, and though the fire outside grew hotter, there was a coolness inside him. The armor he had worn for so long was gone. The question was whether he could survive without it. By noon, Tessa Bloom stormed into his office, her heels clicking like gunfire across the marble. She threw a folder on his desk, her face pale with anger. "Do you understand what you have done?" she demanded. "The board is finished with you. They are drawing up contracts to remove you as CEO." Adrian opened the folder, glancing at the legal jargon without surprise. "Good," he said simply. Tessa blinked,
as if she had not heard correctly. "Good. You will lose everything." "Not everything," Adrian replied, his voice steady, "just the mask." Later that evening, he drove not to a boardroom but to Maya's studio. Her bottles and plants always surrounded her, the air heavy with the layers of fragrance she had built like a sanctuary. She looked up when he entered, her expression cautious but softer than it had been days before. "She said you should not be here, though she did not ask him to leave." "I signed the papers," Adrian told her. "By the end of the week, I will no longer be CEO of Veil Fragrances." Maya set down the bottle in her hand. "And what will you be then?" "A man trying to start over," he answered. "A man who wants to build something that matters." "With you." Maya searched his eyes, looking for performance, for the mask she had grown accustomed to, but there was only exhaustion and a spark of something unfamiliar behind it: humility. "What do you want to build?" she asked cautiously. "A new brand," Adrian said, his voice steady. "One that honors where scents come from, the cultures, the histories, the families like yours." "Heritage scents." Maya's breath caught. Heritage scents. It was bold, almost audacious, but it was also an idea that resonated deep inside her. "And what makes you think I would do this with you?" she asked. "Because," Adrian said, his voice quieter now, "I cannot do it without you." The silence stretched, the weight of his words hanging between them. Finally, Maya shook her head slowly. "If you want to do this, it cannot be about you. It cannot be another Veil empire." "It will not be," Adrian promised. "We will build it together, equal partners. 10% of profits to a cultural heritage fund. Complete transparency in sourcing. No shortcuts." Maya folded her arms, studying him. "And if you break that promise?" "Then I lose everything again," Adrian said. "But this time, I will not deserve to get it back." A flicker of trust returned to Maya's eyes for the first time in weeks. But before she could answer, the door opened, and a familiar figure stepped inside. Vivian Vale, elegant as ever in her cream silk blouse and pearls, froze at seeing her son and Maya together. Her lips tightened, her eyes cold. "So, this is where you have been wasting your time." Adrian stiffened. "Mother." Vivian's gaze swept the small studio, her nose wrinkling at the cluttered shelves and handwritten labels. "You gave up your company, your legacy, for this? For her?" Maya bristled, but before she could speak, Adrian stepped forward. "I did not give up. I left it behind. It was never truly mine." Vivian's eyes flashed. "Your father would never have approved." "My father is the reason I am here," Adrian said quietly. "I am finished hiding from him." The words landed like a thunderclap. Vivian's face hardened, her hand clutching the pearl necklace at her throat. "You will regret this," she hissed, before sweeping out the door, leaving the air thick with tension. Maya exhaled slowly, her chest tight. "She is not wrong," she said softly. "You may regret it." "Maybe," Adrian admitted, "but not tonight." He turned to her, his expression resolute. "Will you stand with me in this?" Maya hesitated. Her sister's warnings echoed in her mind. The boycotts, the betrayals, the risk of attaching her name to a man whose shadow loomed so large. But she also saw the man who had stood on national television and stripped himself bare. The man who had walked away from power for truth's sake. "I will stand," she said at last, "but only if you swear to the oath you just made. Transparency, equality, respect for heritage, no more lies." Adrian's voice was steady. "I swear." And in that small studio, surrounded by the scents of memory and healing, a fragile partnership was born. Whether it could survive the storms ahead remained uncertain, but for the first time, Adrian Vale and Maya Arden stood on the same ground, rooted in something more profound than ambition. It was an oath sealed not with signatures or contracts, but with trust, and the promise of something neither of them had ever known before. The oath spoken in the quiet of Maya's studio had set something into motion, a current neither she nor Adrian could easily resist. Word spread quickly that Veil Fragrance's former king was dismantling the empire that had once crowned him, and was preparing to build anew under a name few understood. Heritage Scents was whispered about in glossy boardrooms, scoffed at by investors, and dissected across blogs that had once thrived on Adrian's controversies. But inside Essence of Peace, the mood was different. The air carried a cautious energy, a shift from survival to possibility. Maya worked longer hours than ever, her fingers stained with oils and her notebooks filled with recipes inspired by her clients' stories. Each blend was a narrative, a grandmother's kitchen, a childhood garden, the memory of a wedding bouquet. And beside her, though clumsy at first, Adrian learned. He asked questions, sniffed oils with the careful concentration of a student desperate to earn passing marks, and filled pages of his own with notes. He made mistakes, lavender drowning out jasmine, cedar clashing with rose, but he did not walk away. For every failure he started again, his jaw set with the stubbornness of a man who had once thought he was beyond learning. Ray often peeked into the back room, her eyes wide as she watched Miami's former perfume king wiping spills from counters and labeling bottles by hand. "Is this real life?" she whispered once, and Maya could not answer. It was real and unreal at once, fragile and terrifying. Outside, however, storms gathered. The boycott against Maya's studio had quieted after Adrian's public declaration, but new criticism surfaced. Bloggers accused Maya of being manipulated, her talents exploited by a fallen mogul desperate for reinvention. Photos of them leaving restaurants, walking along the beach, and entering her apartment were splashed across gossip sites, each caption dripping with speculation. Kayla seethed every time she saw them. She insisted he use you for cover, pacing Maya's kitchen late into the night. Men like him do not change, they just adapt. Maya wanted to argue, but doubt gnawed at her. She remembered the prototype bottle leaked to the press, her name printed in sleek font without her permission. Could she trust that Adrian's promises were not another mask? The question became harder to ignore the night Vivian Vale returned. It was nearly midnight when the knock came at the studio door. Still cleaning up after a long day, Maya froze at the sharp rap against the glass. She opened it cautiously, and there Vivian stood, pristine in her tailored suit, her perfume a sharp, icy floral that seemed to choke the air. "We need to talk," Mrs. Vale said without preamble, sweeping inside as though the space belonged to her. Maya crossed her arms. "About what?" "About my son," Vivian replied smoothly, "about how you are leading him into ruin." Maya's jaw tightened. "He is leading himself." Vivian's laugh was cold. "Adrian has always been reckless, desperate for validation, and now he has found it in you. Do you think you are the first woman to inspire him? The first muse to be bottled, marketed, and discarded?" The words sliced deep, though Maya did not flinch. "He ended Vale Fragrances for this," she said, "for something real." Vivian's eyes hardened. "Do not fool yourself. He walked away because he was cornered. And when the walls close in again, he will leave this behind too." With that, she placed a sleek envelope on the counter. Inside was a legal notice, a preliminary injunction filed by Vale Fragrances board. They sued Adrian for breach of fiduciary duty, demanding damages in the millions, and attempting to block him from creating a competing company. Maya stared at the document, her throat dry. This could destroy him. Vivian smoothed her jacket. "You think he is free, but he never will be. He is still mine." And then she was gone, leaving only her perfume's faint, suffocating trail behind. When Adrian arrived the next morning, Maya thrust the envelope into his hands. He read it silently, his expression unreadable, then set it aside. "They cannot stop me," he said. "They can bankrupt you," Maya countered. "They can bury you in court for years." Adrian met her gaze, his voice low but unwavering. "Then let them. I am not turning back." Maya's heart pounded. She wanted to believe him and step fully into this fragile partnership they had begun. But Vivian's words lingered. Was she another chapter in Adrian's cycle of reinvention, destined to be abandoned when the pressure mounted? That evening, as they sat together blending oils, Maya caught him staring at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "Adrian said that I have never been more certain of anything, and that terrifies me." Maya's breath caught. She wanted to demand assurances, to build walls against the inevitable hurt, but instead she placed a bottle in his hand. "Then let us create something that cannot be erased." Together, they blended sandalwood with rose, a scent neither too heavy nor too sweet, a balance neither could have achieved alone. It was imperfect, but it was theirs. Outside the studio, unseen in the shadows of the street, a figure watched. Olivia, dressed in red once again, her eyes glinting with a cold hunger. She lifted her phone, snapped a photo of the light spilling from the window, and whispered into the night. "Let us see how long this little fantasy lasts." The threshold had been crossed. Maya and Adrian had taken their first steps toward building something new, but the past, their fears, enemies, and fragile doubts, was waiting just beyond the door. The following week unfolded like a storm with no eye, relentless and unforgiving. News of the lawsuit filed by Veil Fragrances spread across industry circles and financial pages, branding Adrian as a reckless traitor who had sabotaged his empire. Investors who once chased him with open wallets now spoke his name with disdain, shaking their heads as though he were a cautionary tale. Maya read the headlines each morning with a mix of dread and disbelief. She had known the fight would be challenging, but the ferocity of it unsettled her. At Essence of Peace, clients continued to trickle in, drawn by curiosity and loyalty in equal measure. But with every step forward, another rumor seemed to drag them backward. The studio became a battlefield of whispered judgments and hopeful experiments, where every blend of oils was an act of creation and defiance. Adrian did not falter publicly. He arrived each day with sleeves rolled up, learning, failing, trying again. Yet Maya saw the shadows in his eyes, the weight of the empire he had abandoned pressing harder, with each lawsuit filed and each headline questioning his sanity. At night, when he thought she was not watching, he stared at his phone for long stretches, scrolling through messages from lawyers, friends, and enemies alike. Then came Olivia's strike. It began with a blog post that went viral within hours. The headline was blunt. "The new heritage sense is built on a lie." The author, hiding behind anonymity, claimed to know that Maya was nothing more than a convenient cover, a figurehead chosen to repair Adrian's image. Screenshots of leaked texts appeared, out of context, edited, but damning enough to ignite fury. In them, Adrian seemed to say Maya was useful for calming backlash, that her story fit the narrative, that sentiment sells. Maya stared at the glowing screen in her hands, her stomach twisting. She read the words repeatedly, each a dagger to the trust she had begun rebuilding. She confronted Adrian that night, her voice trembling with restrained anger. "Did you say these things?" Adrian's face drained of color as he took the phone from her hand, reading the post in silence. His jaw clenched, his hands shaking. "These are twisted," he said finally. "I told some of those words, yes, but not like this. Not about you." Maya folded her arms across her chest, her voice sharp. "Then what were they about?" Adrian ran his hands through his hair, pacing. "They were about the board and the strategies they used when I was still running Veil. They believed every connection was a narrative to exploit. But I was not talking about you, not us. But the damage was done. The screenshots were spreading faster than the truth ever could. Clients called to cancel appointments. Orders slowed. And for Maya, the memory of Vivian's cold warning returned like a ghost. You think you are different, but not. That night, she retreated to Kayla's apartment again, needing distance from the storm. She told herself it was to think, to protect her business, and to protect her mother's legacy. But deep down she knew it was also to protect her heart. Adrian, left alone in the studio, felt the emptiness crush him. He smashed his phone against the floor, glass shattering like the last illusion of control. The world outside still painted him as the villain, and now Maya, the only person whose faith mattered, was slipping away. The next morning, Olivia appeared in the press, no longer anonymous. Draped in crimson, she smiled at the cameras and declared herself the whistleblower who had exposed Adrian's new deception. She recounted their past relationship, her words dripping with poison. "I know Adrian Veil better than anyone," she told the nation, "and I can tell you, he will say and do anything to sell a story. This new partnership is no different." Maya watched the broadcast in silence, her chest aching. Kayla sat beside her, muttering curses under her breath, but Maya barely heard them. All she could hear were Olivia's words and the echo of her own doubts. At the studio, the phone stopped ringing. Online, hashtags calling for boycotts trended again. The fragile shoots of heritage scents withered under the firestorm, and Adrian's shoulders bent under the weight of a battle he could not win alone. Yet even in the darkest hours, a spark refused to die. Late at night, Adrian sat at the work table surrounded by bottles and memories. He reopened his notes, his handwriting messy and frantic, and began sketching a new idea, not for the world, investors, but for Maya. A fragrance that spoke of resilience, of truth born from fire. He wrote one name at the top of the page, Redemption. He did not know if she would ever smell it, or if she would ever believe in him again. But for the first time in his life, Adrian Vale was creating not for profit, not for applause, but for love. And somewhere, watching from the shadows, Olivia smiled, satisfied. For she knew the storm was only beginning. The days that followed Olivia's attack were some of the hardest Maya had ever known. Essence of Peace had once been her sanctuary, a place filled with the comfort of amber light, trailing ivy, and the fragrances that carried her mother's legacy forward. Now it was a fortress under siege. Customers arrived not with open smiles, but with hesitation, their eyes darting to her as if weighing the truth of the headlines against the warmth of her welcome. Some never crossed the threshold, turning back after taking one photo for gossip blogs. Adrian tried to shield her. He took calls from angry suppliers, argued with reporters who hovered outside, and confronted the paparazzi who lurked near the door. Yet in his determination, Maya saw something that unsettled her, a desperation, an edge of recklessness, the same force that had once driven him to build Vale Fragrances on controversy. He wanted to fix everything for her, but the harder he tried, the less control he seemed to have. Kayla's warnings rang in Maya's ears. He is chaos, and chaos follows him. Do not let him pull you under. But the truth was more complicated. Because even in the chaos, there were moments when Adrian disarmed her completely. He still came to the studio at dawn, hands ink-stained with notes, carrying new sketches for scents he wanted to test. He laughed when his experiments went wrong, admitting freely when Maya's blends outshone his. And one evening, after they had worked in silence for hours, he leaned across the table and whispered, "I am not fighting for the business anymore. I am fighting for you." Those words haunted her. They were tender, raw, and terrifying. Then came the broadcast. Olivia returned to the spotlight with evidence she claimed was undeniable. A set of audio recordings from Adrian's past strategy meetings. His voice was unmistakable, cold and sharp in them as he talked about manipulating narratives, exploiting trends, and leveraging relationships for maximum gain. At one point, his voice said clearly, "People are pawns in this game. It does not matter who they are or what they believe. If they can sell a story, they have value." The networks played the clips on repeat. To the public, they were confirmation of everything Olivia had alleged. To Maya, they were a knife twisting in her chest. When Adrian arrived at the studio that night, she confronted him again, her eyes burning. "Did you say it?" He did not flinch. "Yes." The word hit her like a blow. "I was a different man then," Adrian continued quickly. "I said it because it was true in my world, the which that. Everyone was a pawn, even me. But I am not that man anymore." Maya turned away, her hands trembling, as she clutched a bottle of jasmine oil, grounding herself in the scent. "But how can I believe that? Every day, another piece of your past proves Olivia right." Adrian reached for her, but she stepped back. He lowered his hands slowly, his shoulders heavy. "Because the only way I know how to prove it is by losing everything else, and I already have." His honesty rattled her more than denial would have, but doubt once seated was hard to uproot. That night, Maya left the studio early, retreating to her sister's apartment again. She told herself she needed clarity, but needed space from the storm Adrian brought with him. Alone in the empty studio, Adrian sat among the bottles and notebooks, staring at the prototype labeled Redemption. He picked it up, inhaled the scent of smoke and rose, fire and renewal. It was unfinished, like him. In another part of the city, Olivia met with a shadowed figure in a private bar. She raised a glass of wine, her smile sharp. "He is unraveling," she said. "Soon, there will be nothing left of him to rebuild." "But Maya," whispered the figure, "she is stronger than he knows." Olivia's smile widened. "Then we will break her too." The breaking point was near, and neither Adrian nor Maya yet knew whether the fire would consume them both or forge something unshakable from the ruins. The lawsuit ground forward like a machine with no conscience, filling Adrian's days with court summons, depositions, and lawyers who spoke clipped about damages and settlements. He attended each session with the same cold determination he once reserved for industry galas, but Maya could see the cracks spreading beneath the surface. The man who had once thrived on spectacle now recoiled from cameras, his shoulders heavy with battles he could not win by charm or bravado. Maya, meanwhile, fought her own war. Essence of Peace was caught in the crossfire, its name dragged into headlines alongside Adrian's. Some clients stood firm, booking appointments out of solidarity, while others vanished, unwilling to risk association with scandal. Each day, Maya woke, uncertain whether an eager customer or an empty studio would greet her, yet she refused to close her doors. To do so would be to surrender her mother's legacy, and surrender was not in her blood. Kayla hovered close, her protectiveness sharpened by fear. One evening, as they closed the shop together, Kayla confronted her. "You cannot keep sacrificing everything for him. He is drowning, and he will pull you down with him." Maya paused, her hands lingering on the lock. "Maybe," she admitted softly, "but perhaps I am the one teaching him to breathe." Kayla shook her head, but she did not argue further. She knew her sister well enough to recognize the stubborn set of her jaw. Meanwhile, Adrian worked tirelessly on redemption, the fragrance he had begun in secret. Night after night, he blended oils, adjusting proportions, chasing a vision only he could see. Smoke and rose, fire and renewal, grief and hope. He carried the prototype with him everywhere, inhaling it like oxygen, clinging to the idea that if he could capture his transformation in scent, maybe Maya would believe in it too. But Olivia was relentless. Each week brought a new article, interview, and revelation from the shadows of Adrian's past. She painted him as a manipulator, a liar, a man incapable of truth. And the more the world believed her, the more Maya's heart wavered. She wanted to trust Adrian, but doubt wrapped around her like ivy, pulling tighter with each headline. The breaking point came on a humid Miami night. Maya was closing the studio when she found Olivia waiting outside, leaning against the lamppost in her signature red dress. Her smile was sharp as glass. "You are wasting your time," Olivia said smoothly. "He will never be who you want him to be." Maya's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "You do not know who he is now." "I know exactly who he is," Olivia replied. "He used me, just as he is using you. He will wrap you in pretty words and promises until you believe you are special. But he will move on when the fire dies, because that is what he does." Maya's throat tightened, but she forced herself to speak. "And why should I believe you?" Olivia whispered. "Because I have the proof," slipping a small flash drive into Maya's hand before walking away. That night, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at the drive. Her hands shook as she plugged it into her laptop. Inside were files, emails, recordings, documents, from Adrian's years at Veil Fragrances. Some were old, some recent, but all painted a damning picture of a man who had manipulated narratives, exploited stories, and viewed people as commodities. Her chest ached as she read. Was this who he still was? Yet something gnawed at her. The documents were too neatly arranged, too perfectly incriminating. And though Adrian's words were harsh, they felt stripped of context, twisted into weapons. She closed the laptop, tears burning her eyes. She could not ignore the firestorm, but could not condemn him without truth. The next morning she went to the studio early, redemption lingering in the air from Adrian's midnight work. She found him asleep at the work table, his head resting on folded arms, the prototype bottle clutched in his hand. He looked younger in sleep, vulnerable, almost childlike. The sight broke something in her. When he stirred, she whispered,
Adrian, tell me everything. No more half-truths, no more masks. If you want me to stand with you, I need all of it, the past, the lies, the mistakes." Adrian met her gaze, his eyes heavy with exhaustion but lit with something fierce. "Then you will have it," he promised, "all of it, even if it ruins me." And so, as the Miami sun rose, casting golden light across the small studio, Adrian Vale began to tell the story he had hidden for years. The story of how he had become the man the world loved to hate, and how he was fighting now not to sell a fragrance, not to save a company, but to be worthy of the woman sitting across from him. The ashes of his past lay between them. Whether they would smother them or kindle something new was yet to be decided. Adrian's confession stretched for hours, spilling into the studio's quiet until the sun climbed high in the Miami sky. He spoke of his childhood, of the mother who had taught him to hide parts of himself to survive in a world that rewarded performance over authenticity. He spoke of the father he never knew, the absence that had hollowed him and left him searching for identity in boardrooms and magazine spreads. He spoke of every manipulative strategy, every cruel word, every mask he had worn to keep his empire alive. Maya listened, her heart heavy but steady. There were moments she wanted to recoil, to shut out the ugliness of his past. Yet through it all, she saw something she had not expected. A man stripping himself bare, not to win her forgiveness, but to free himself from the lies he had lived in finally. When he finished, silence hung thick between them. Maya reached for the prototype bottle he had guarded so fiercely. She uncapped it and inhaled the scent. Smoke and rose, grief and hope, fire and renewal. It was imperfect, but real. "This," she said softly, "is you." Adrian's eyes filled with something raw, something unguarded. "Then keep it," he whispered. "It was always meant for you." In that moment, Maya knew the choice before her. She could walk away, protect her business, shield her heart, and leave him to face the ruins of his empire alone. Or she could stand beside him, not as a pawn in his reinvention, but as a partner in something new. "I will build heritage sense with you," she said finally, "but not as your shield, not as your cover, as your equal." Adrian bowed his head, relief flooding his face. "As my equal," he repeated, "always." Word of their partnership spread quickly. The industry scoffed at first, calling it reckless, doomed. But the story caught fire, two people forging something new from ashes, blending heritage and memory into scent. Customers who had abandoned Maya's studio returned, curious about the fragrances and the truth they embodied. Their first official release, Mother's Memory, launched quietly online. The bottle was simple, adorned with a handwritten story card. Within hours, it sold out. By the end of the week, they had orders from around the country. For once, the success felt honest. But the storm was not finished. Olivia reappeared with venom in her smile, brandishing new accusations. Vivian Vale summoned Adrian to confront him one last time, her voice dripping with disdain for the son who had dismantled everything she had built with him. Lawsuits pressed harder, investors threatened bankruptcy, and critics dismissed Heritage Sense as a sentimental fantasy. Through it all, Maya and Adrian worked side by side. They blended oils late into the night, drafted plans for community partnerships, and hired staff who shared their vision. For every obstacle, they found a way forward. For every accusation, they answered with transparency. Slowly, the world began to believe. Then came the night of the launch event for their whole collection. The venue was nothing like the sterile ballrooms Adrian had once commanded. Instead, it was a warm, inviting space filled with plants, photographs, and handwritten stories. Each fragrance had a tale behind it, a grandmother's recipe, a childhood home, a song remembered. Guests wept as they read, inhaled the scents, and found their memories mirrored within. At the end of the evening, Adrian took the stage beside Maya. He did not wear his old armor of arrogance. He spoke simply, honestly, about loss, healing, and finding truth in scent and story. When he finished, he turned to Maya, his voice trembling. "There is one more story I want to share," he said. "Ours." Gasps rippled through the crowd as he knelt,
pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring with a yellow diamond, glowing like the dress she had worn to their first interview. "Maya Arden," he said, "you walked into my life smelling like love when I did not even know what love was. You showed me how to be real, how to be whole. Will you marry me?" For a moment, the world held its breath. Then Maya smiled through tears and whispered, "Yes." The room erupted in applause, but the noise faded into nothing for Maya and Adrian. At that moment, only two of them were bound not by empire or controversy, but by truth. Months later, heritage scents flourished. Lawsuits dwindled, critics softened, and customers grew loyal. Maya's studio remained the heart of it all, where scents told stories and healing bloomed. Kayla was still teased and warned, but she smiled more now, seeing her sister happy. Even Vivian, wary and proud, began to appear at family dinners, her icy demeanor thawing under the warmth of something she had never believed in: authenticity. Adrian and Maya built not just a company, but a fragile and fierce life rooted in ashes that grew into something lasting. And every night, when the world quieted, Adrian would reach for the redemption bottle on their shelf. He never sold it, never released it. It belonged only to Maya, a reminder of where they had been and how far they had come. In the end, their story was not about scandal or empire. It was about two people who had faced fire, had been broken and remade, and had chosen each other in the ruins. Ashes and embers had become something new, and as Maya rested her head against Adrian's shoulder, the scent of vanilla, sandalwood, and rose lingering in the air, she knew this was only the beginning.